Thank you very much. I just want to say all of the speakers and the talks have been just incredible today, so no pressure whatsoever. I'm also really excited to be presenting alongside a Triceratops today. That's kind of awesome. That's a first for me. Okay, so single page access. A little bit about me first. My name is Hinton. If you'd like to follow me on GitHub or Twitter, you can find me at noobcat. I'm a front-end developer at Kickstarter, and my front-end development journey started around 12 years ago, and a few years into my career, I was actually in 2007, I was a part-time accessibility QA engineer. So if that kind of gives you a bit of background on why I want to speak about this topic today. As Jen said before in my intro, I do a lot of hardware stuff, so I'm actually a member of the Node.js hardware working group. So I write a lot of the tool chains behind the scenes to make node bots and robotics more fun in Node.js. Recently, I became a member of a new community team for Ember called the Ember Accessibility Project Team. And we center around trying to bring more encouragement to authoring better, accessible things under the Ember framework umbrella. So we're a team that meets every couple of weeks, and we do a lot of groundwork in sort of getting some of these thoughts happening in the greater Ember community and not just the accessibility community. One of the members of that community group is Rob DeLuca, and he said something in one of his talks recently that really stuck with me. And it was that we as developers have a multiplier effect on what we do. And what I mean by that is, as developers, one of us can sit down and write a single feature and code it all by ourselves. And when that gets released, when it's deployed, millions of people can interact with that one thing that you created. And so it starts with one person, and then that's having a greater impact on lots and lots of people. And a lot of the time, we're writing this code to improve people's lives. So when we program, we're often providing access to services that never existed before. We're providing better efficiency to services that already exist. We are also helping people access and understand information better. And all of this works towards improving people's lives and having an impact on those people's lives. The trouble is that we don't always reach everybody. I think we all intend to reach everybody, but that's just not always the case. And that's why there is a push, and there has been a push since the 90s, to provide a better, more accessible experience online overall. We have a really large set of tools that we can choose from these days in front end. It's quite dizzying, and I think Rebecca Murphy said it well earlier today when she said that it's easier and better for us to provide these products now and put them online. But I want you to sort of maybe think slightly outside of the developer experience and think about how the choice of our tools impact on the users who are interacting with the things that we made with those tools. So these are 3 tools that are pretty popular. They all have one thing in common. Raise your hand if you've used any one of these front-end tools. Okay, so this is the majority from what I can see from the bright lights. They're all fantastic. We've got React, we've got Angular, and Ember. And this isn't a spoiler alert when they say that they're all front-end frameworks. And front-end frameworks have just had an enormous paradigm shift on the way we think about producing applications. They have a lot of strengths, and we really embrace them, and that's the reason why they've become so popular. But front-end frameworks can also present new kinds of challenges that we're not used to working with. So my question for today that we're going to explore is, are these front-end frameworks accessible? And can we do anything about it if they're not? So all of my examples we're going to explore today are in Ember because that's what I know best. And I'm also part of the Ember accessibility team, as mentioned before. So I want to provide a good in-depth coverage of a number of different topics within the accessibility realm. It's obviously not an exhaustive list because I only have 25 minutes, but we're going to look at some things that we can all do to make the experience better when using these tools. So let's get into it. Topic number 1, motor ability. So motor ability sort of conceptualizes how we use our bodies to access online and also desktop applications. It's how we use our body in order to get the computer to do what we want it to do, right? So a lot of the times we're presented with an interface we interact with, such as a touch interface, a keyboard interface, or a mouse. And I think that a lot of the time the general assumption is that on desktop that everybody's using a mouse. And the thing is that all of our physical motor abilities vary so widely, in the population of people on Earth. And so not everyone can use a mouse. Some people predominantly get around by keyboard. Some people only have access to one button. That's right, just one button to get around. And others have all sorts of fancy sensors as well, if they don't have access to a button. So the question that I want to explore within this is a mouse necessary for your site? And I think that's a really important thing to think about. So this is a little bit of Ember code. It's a small snippet. Essentially, we have an element. It's a span. We have an action attached to that span. So an action, if the event is not specified in Ember, is a click event. So this is just your regular click event. And the function that it executes upon receiving that click event is expand notifications. Now this makes sense because the text says show notifications. So this is a piece of UI that is supposed to be clicked, and then a resulting action is supposed to happen. We'll also see examples like this as well. This is very similar. We have, let's say we have several list elements, and upon clicking all of them, they all respond with a different action. Some of you will probably already be able to spot the problem with this, and that is that things like li elements and spans and divs and a whole wealth of other elements such as paragraphs, they're not keyboard focusable. So we may be able to hack some click events to happen, but that click event doesn't bubble up the keyboard event because it's not recognized as semantically focusable element. So let's do a demonstration. I have this cool social network here. It's going to be the latest thing, I promise. And I've come in through my regular page, and I can see that I've got 4 notifications. And I was like, oh, I'm getting popular. Cool, OK. And I want to access this show notifications. So I'm a keyboard user, so I'm going to press tab. And nothing happened. So is this fake? Is it just suggesting that it is? And it doesn't seem to be. I should be able to just roll over that. But it's still not doing anything. So I'm going to keep pressing tab. OK, I've gotten back to the top of the page, and I still can't seem to focus it. So I know for a fact that Stephen Hawking actually uses a sensor on his cheek to be able to have the computer cycle through the elements on a page to focus on. And if it arrives on something he wants to focus on, then he activates that sensor. Essentially, Stephen Hawking can't access my social network, and that kind of sucks. So a better way we can do this is to have a look at the elements that are naturally semantically focusable by default. So an example of this is a button. Another example is a link, so the A or the anchor tag. I've done nothing else. All I've done is change this button semantics to be a proper button. So let's see if that has an impact on this social network. And you can see there, as soon as I hit tab, because it's the first focusable element on the screen, I was able to access it. So that's great and required super minimal effort on my behalf. So I can now activate that button, and I can actually read all of my notifications, which is great. And I have lots that I can choose from, but we'll come back to that. So it's very easy to say we should do this, but how do we rely on everyone in our team to make sure that these regressions aren't making their way into our applications? Well, there are a few tools in each framework that we can use. In Ember, Ember Template Lint is a brand new add-on. And it lints all manner of things in your templates, but it also makes sure that all of your actions are only applied to focusable elements, which is great. So you get that for free. And I hear a rumor that this particular add-on is going to be made part of Ember CLI core very soon. So you'll get that out of the box and you can just turn that on, which is great. If you're using React, you can use React A11Y, which is the shortened version of accessibility. And this will lint all of your things as well, which is great. For Angular, if you use Protractor, there is an A11Y plugin in order to do that. So if you just search for Protractor A11Y plugin, that will come up and you can turn that on in your test, which is awesome. We've built tools for this, so we don't have an excuse. So the too long didn't read of this particular example is always use buttons and links, because semantic HTML is your friend. You really have to go out of the way to provide these really strange experiences. And to be honest, not everyone's at fault for that. I've had to pull request front-end framework guides and tutorials before because their examples have actions assigned to things like headings, which are just not accessible at all. It also means that Stephen Hawking can use a website. That's pretty cool. So we're done, right? We solved it. We solved all of the accessibility issues in front-end frameworks. Let's all go to the beach. Let's have some ice cream. I didn't realize that was going to happen, I promise. But we're not done. So let's have a look at a couple more examples so we can see how this starts having like a bigger and bigger impact on different sets of users. So this example covers motor ability like before, but also vision. And this is specifically blindness. So if somebody is using a screen reader to get around, they're still using a keyboard. It's just not related to their motor ability. So this affects both parties. And I'll talk about the motor ability mostly for this example. So front-end frameworks give us this really, really powerful opportunity to have dynamic content. It's very easy to hook up things in React to funnel the data down, which just immediately updates the DOM. So we have a lot of things happening on the page at once. And formerly, before this stuff was in vogue, we would fetch an entire page and that would come back, right? So this gives us some really great performance benefits and it's a little snappier for the user. But the problem that I want to focus on for this example, which sometimes is a side effect of all of this dynamic content, is loss of cursor position. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So we're back at our social network, and we fixed the button. So I'm going to go through on my keyboard again. I'm going to highlight this button here, and just going to open my notifications. So you'll notice that that blue highlight around the notification kind of told the user where they were, but it also held their cursor in that position. So imagine if I had lots of menu items on this social network, or lots of other keyboard, focusable elements before this button, and I hadn't provided a way to skip all of that stuff. They've already come all the way through all of those items, or they've waited for their computer to cycle through all of them before selecting the notifications. And if the button disappears, then what happens to the focus state? Well, that resets too, doesn't it? So it just goes straight back up to the top of the page again, right back to the beginning. So you can imagine how frustrating this is. And even I have to right now keep tabbing through in order to finally get to my link. So that's not a fantastic experience either. We've essentially kind of switched things around, and now the user is completely disoriented and is not quite sure what's happened. So let's think about something a little bit more courteous. In our template, we're using logic to say, if the notifications aren't expanded, show the button. If it is, then hide the button or unmount the button and mount our list instead. So we can actually pass along the focus, and we can manage those focus expectations for the user quite effectively with only a few lines of code. So my Ember component here is pretty straightforward. I have an isExpanded property, which drives the logic in the template. And my action, when I click or activate the button, is to just toggle that property so that we can have that instant connection happening. So if we go and add a couple more lines of code, And we can do this with the convenience of an Ember add-on. We can still use that toggle, but we can also then say, OK, so because we've lost this focus, we can now restore what should be the expected focus for the user, which in this case should be the list of links, right? That's where they're going to want to navigate next. So let's see if this code at the bottom here improved things a little bit. So you can see the blue hover is highlighting the button, and then I'm going to activate that like before, and that focus is going to disappear. You can see there it was instantly replaced to highlight the content that had just come in. And so that would be more what a user would reasonably expect from accessing this, right? Especially if they're not using a mouse. And from there, I can actually start going through my links and choose one. So a couple of lines of code, it's made a pretty big impact. So if you're using Ember, there is a really nice convenience add-on called Ember Component Focus, and that's what I'm using in my code example. And it just allows you to be able to specify which element in your component you are passing the focus to next. There is React Focus Trap if you're using React. Now this is really powerful because this was built with modal dialogues in mind. And for those who have tried to make those accessible in the past, you know it's quite finicky. So that particular one is very, very powerful for React. I encourage you to check it out. If you're using Angular, I may have missed out, so please tweet at me if you know of one. But I couldn't find a tool that sort of takes some of the boilerplate out of that. But we're talking about just calling .focus on something, right? You know, we've been able to do that since the jQuery days quite effectively. So writing something custom shouldn't be too bad either. So the too long didn't read of that is be courteous when you switch stuff up. All right, let's go to the park. And again, we had lunch in the park, and I didn't see that happening either, so there you go. So we did it. But I want to show you one more example. So let's have a think about, you know, our user previous to, in the previous example, was also a screen reader user, and they benefit, and I'll show you that benefit soon. And, you know, imagine not being able to see the screen, and someone, like, you know, let's say you're on the phone to someone and you're trying to coach them through how to change their privacy settings on Facebook. Just imagine trying to do that for a second. And that's what it's like accessing the web when you don't have vision, you can't see. So browsers and screen readers actually have a really great relationship. They have a contract where the browser lets the accessibility tree in the operating system know what's happening at all times, and that's awesome. So when you fetch a new page from the server, it immediately notifies and queues up a message in the screen reader that the page is loading. It also says the percentage that it's loaded, and it will then let the user know when it's fully loaded, and it's basically the document.ready of screen readers. That's awesome. So they know that they can start tabbing through, or they know that they can start like listening to text. Unfortunately, client-side page loads of those in front-end frameworks, the screen reader is met with complete silence. So if they move to another route, they have no idea whether the website worked or not. And so that can be really disorienting. Essentially, we broke screen reader access. We broke that contract between the accessibility tree in the browser and the operating system tree, which assists the screen reader to let the user know what's going on. But we can totally fix it. We can go back and patch up these front-end frameworks. So in Ember, we have a main accessibility template, and we use handlebars. So all of the routes are piped through this single outlet here. So that's where all of the important content is that changes every time you visit a new route. So what if we swap this out for something that was aware that it needs to be communicating when we've got fresh content and it's loaded and it's ready to go? If we install the Ember A11Y plugin, we have at our disposal a focusing outlet. And you could probably guess what it does, but let's dig in, and I'm going to turn on the screen reader so we can fully appreciate what's happening.
VoiceOver on Chrome, single page access / Suze Hinton, window, single page access / Suze Hinton, HTML content has keyboard focus.
All right, so I'm just going to silence that, but it's telling me, you know, what's going on in my browser and that I'm focusing on my slides right now.
Show notifications button.
Okay, so I know I want a button and I want to show my notifications.
Heartsuit, Stacy liked your video. Heartsuit, Aziz has sent you a friend request. Heartsuit, Mariko sent you a personal message. Heartsuit, Ashley commented on your photo group with 4 items.
Cool. All right, so I have 4 notifications. There are 4 items that I can interact with. So I think I want to see what message Mariko has sent me, because I think we were planning to do something this weekend.
4 items interact with. Link. Visited. Link. Heartsuit, Mariko sent you a personal message.
All right, so when I hit this link, I'm going to go to a new route.
Message from Mariko. Hi, just thinking of you. Face throwing a kiss. Wanna check out the museum tomorrow? Mariko back to home group with 3 items.
So I love that emojis are completely accessible to screen readers, because I believe everyone should have access to emoji. But that's beside the point. So I now know that new content has arrived, and I'm now being told about that new content, and that I can interact with 3 items. I have my heading, message from Mariko, I have the message itself, and a link to home. So I'm not going to reply to this straight away, because I've got a talk to give. So I'll let her know later that, yes, we should go to the museum. So I'm going to go back to home so that we can visit the home route to see whether or not we can be told that we're back home.
3 items interact with wanna visited. Link. Back to home. You have 4 new notifications. Show notifications group with 2 items.
Great. So we know that we're back at home. And that's really the bare minimum that we should be providing for screen readers and users who use them. So great.
Home. Cool social network. Frame.
All right.
Voiceover off.
He's very helpful, though. OK, so the Ember plugin that I told you about was ember.a11y. And so you can use the focusable element once you've installed that. A11y announcer is the React equivalent, and that was inspired by a previous Ember accessibility deprecated add-on called Route Announcer. So this is slightly different in that it just finds the, you can create like a heading, and it will find that heading, the title element of the page and read out the title. It will then say whether it has loaded or not. So it goes a little bit extra step, which is kind of cool. And you're in luck if you use Angular. If you are already on Material 2, or you're using that as part of your application, you get this free out of the box with Live Announcer. So you shouldn't really have to do anything or find anything to bolt onto it. So that's awesome. And thank you to Marcy Sutton and the accessibility team there for doing that. So the too long didn't read for this is help users find their way. That's on the user side. But also, let's not break native browser features. Like, I don't know how many of you here today knew that as well as our DOM and our CSS OM and our rendering tree, we also have an accessibility tree. And you can find that in Chrome by, I think you can write about accessibility or something like that. And there's actually an accessibility inspector that comes as part of Xcode too that you can check out and watch what's happening. So let's not break the contract that browsers have, vendors have worked so hard to set up for users that deserve access. All right, so listen to some jazz music. And it's not a trick this time. We're done with the examples. It's obviously not everything that happens in frameworks. There's also vestibular issues with transitions and lots of other topics, but that's what we'll do for today. So where do we go from here? We can see direct code examples that can help us get this stuff a little bit more accessible. But how can we do even better, and how can we form a framework in order to make sure that we're always doing that? Well, the first thing is education. The WCAG guidelines, as well as the ARIA spec, provides all the information you need, and there's multiple online courses you can take for accessibility. So it's really important to sort of know the kind of traps to look for, and it does provide you with a better idea of what front-end frameworks actually do, so you can spot those things ahead of time. Another thing you can do, and you will probably need to do, is to campaign for accessibility to be part of your process in your job. So not just bolted on at the end, but actually part of the product design, the spec writing, the estimates of time and things like that. So that means including product managers and even the CTO in the conversation, because they have the power to give you the time to make your application more accessible in the first place. You can always estimate tasks with accessibility in mind. So if you're not sure how to make a particularly complex feature on the site accessible, you can factor that in by saying, I need 2 days of research time to ensure that we're doing the right thing. And so building that in protects you from having to get in trouble for spending extra time on something. Incorporate accessibility testing into your test suite. There's a number of these tools to get you started. And so, I honestly believe that we should break a build when something that's inaccessible is going to go out to a user. I think that no one wants to release broken software. And if something's not accessible, I consider that broken software, and I would encourage all of us to think the same way. So we touched a little bit earlier on what we do in our jobs. We write code to improve people's lives. And so another way of phrasing this is, why do we program? We might program because we love solving problems. And I think these are some really interesting problems to solve. Because we program to build things for other humans. They're all other people. They're not us. They're the greater user base. And humans are not edge cases, and we need to stop treating them like that. We need to stop thinking that not using a mouse is an atypical experience, because there's no such thing as the perfect average user. And a lot of people that need assistive tech already go through life feeling like they're a constant edge case. So wouldn't it be nice to be able to provide something online where they can be anonymous and also find that their needs are being provided for? I think that's really powerful, and we have that opportunity. Freedom of speech and freedom of information are super important, and I hear it being talked about a lot in tech. The thing is, the internet provides an amazing platform for these two rights, because all people deserve access to online services when they provide freedom of information and freedom of speech. And sometimes this is the only avenue some people have. And another point is that I hear this term bandied out a lot within our tech community when we're looking inward, and that is that we're moving the web forward. So we have all of these new exciting APIs to use in the browser. We have all of these really cool front-end frameworks coming out. We have the JavaScript spec changing and evolving, and we have really nice sugar and language additions that we can use to make our experiences better. But I want you to have a look around and outside of your ecosystem and think, are we really moving the web forward if we're still leaving people behind consistently? Moving the web forward for me means providing more and more people with access to information, which is what the internet was invented for in the first place. So whether or not you like it, your code is political. So someone who wishes to remain anonymous once said that computers do exactly what we tell them, and no more. Exactly what we tell them, and no more. So I think it's time that we thought about and we applied ourselves to tell computers exactly what the right thing is to do. Thank you.
This topic is always infuriating to me because it always reminds me of all these discussions I have with colleagues and people on the internet and stuff, where I'm like, oh, should I use this framework? And either I get yeah, but without any information about accessibility, or I heard that it sucks for accessibility without any actual meat to it. And then I've been finding out recently about all these really great movements within all these frameworks, just like the ones that you've listed. Marcy Sutton's work for Angular has been really great, and we're working on a project where they want to use Angular, and originally people were shooting it down, and it was oh no, we should use this. I think there are two questions. My own question is, how can we convince CTOs and managers who have just a different way of thinking than this? Their thinking is, we got to get this built now for the type of user that we think is going to use this. What can we do to convince them otherwise?
I think that's a really good question. And an issue that we have when looking at statistics for accessibility is that people who come online don't necessarily want to and shouldn't necessarily have to give us information about themselves, such as, am I using a screen reader? Do I have these needs, right? And so we don't have a lot of these statistics. We just have surveys that screen reader users and et cetera fill out. And so not being able to provide those stats is really challenging for CTOs and product managers, because I think, well, what is the economical or the financial benefit of this? And I think that that's, first of all, a bit of a cultural problem to overcome. But a success that we saw recently in my job at Kickstarter was we ran a 2-day accessibility workshop, and it was very technically focused, but we had, on one of the mornings, we made it mandatory for every single product manager to attend, and there were also other managerial roles that were basically their entire morning was cleared so that they could attend. And I think what was so sobering was just them seeing the people we're leaving behind, and that, you know, statistically, this is anything from 0 to 20% of people that use the internet. That's a staggering number, and it almost moves them to think it's not just about the money, it's about, like, what are we doing? Why are we making this product if we're shipping something that's broken? And that really changed the way that a lot of product managers approached designers and developers working together even, and it's encouraged a much closer relationship to get these better products out there.
That's cool. Yeah, or you can just like show them all like the lawsuits that have happened, suing companies. I always feel like fear is like the best like
It
thing
can
to
work.
go with.
I mean, so, you know, people commonly think that it's only government agencies that are providing services that need to, serve at a certain standard accessibility.
Section 508.
Which is, AA. But any user can legally, can entangle themselves, in a lawsuit with you if you're, quite intentionally not providing that service by scoping it out and things like that. So airline websites recently were forced to do that because if someone can't buy their own flight online or they can't check their bank balance online, then that just dramatically cuts them out of so many services that would assist them so much. So yeah, the legal ramifications can sometimes light a fire.
Yeah. One of the attendees had asked, how can they set up a screen reader so that they can test their own sites?
That is an amazing question. Okay, so who uses a Mac? Cool. If you press Command F5, don't be scared, your built-in screen reader voiceover will appear, and you can actually follow a tutorial. It will give you a dialogue and you can follow that. So Apple will walk you through how to use this screen reader. So you already have that baked in. And users who use screen readers on a Mac usually couple VoiceOver and Safari. So they're the things to test with. So your challenge is, once you've learned how to use a screen reader, you'll be able to navigate your own website and appreciate how difficult that can be. And like your what's it called? Like your temptation to just grab the mouse will be very telling. On Windows there is JAWS, although it is quite expensive, but you can have like a 40-minute trial period thing where you can just keep reopening it. I didn't really recommend that, but I sort of am. And
Freeware.
there is an open source version of a Windows screen reader called NVDA, and it's written by Australians, which is awesome, my home country. And I think all of the developers are blind, so they have this really great open source product that you can also test. So spinning up a Windows VM is quite straightforward. It's JAWS and Internet Explorer or Edge, and it's NVDA and Firefox. They're kind of the common couplings there.
Cool, awesome. I also think, one last thing, since there are all these initiatives within all these frameworks to do accessibility, it sounds like a really good way for people who want to get involved in open source that aren't necessarily wanting to work on like the core kind of stuff. This is like extremely important. It seems like a good way for them to make their way into open source contribution.
Absolutely. So the way that I got involved in the Ember accessibility community team was I was pull requesting the Ember guides because they had accessibility anti-patterns in their tutorials. So if people are blindly following these tutorials, then that there is just nipping issues in the bud and fixing things. And I was recognized for that and was told to join the accessibility topic in Slack, and now I'm a part of that. So you don't have to contribute code to core in order to do this. A lot of the assistive things we hope to be in core one day are right now provided as add-ons, and that's our way of politely persuading core to consider having this stuff available out of the box.
Thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
I hope I get an invite to Cool Social Network.
I'll send you one after the break.
Thank you.